Okay, hi guys. Welcome back once again. Uh, just have a few moments until our class begins. But thanks for being here, and you guys are doing well. About 4 minutes until it's 9 a.m. Hey Megan, how's it going? Good to see you. Hey Eva. And hey Senna, good to see you too. All right, just a couple minutes and then we're ready to go. Hey Kelly. Anybody here, just feel free as usual to say hello. Always good to see everyone here. Hey Drew. Good to see you. Good morning. All right, just a couple seconds here. So hopefully you guys are ready to roll into this review session. If you have the study guide, that's always good. Let's see here. Okay, a couple seconds. Here we are. Thanks, guys. Welcome back. Good morning. It's 9 a.m. So let me just kick things off. This is the second part 2 of the review session. Friday, we've got our exam coming, so we want to take a little more time to brush up on the topics that you see in the study guide. To those that have messaged me looking for their score, not to worry. You're going to get your reply today. I just had a very busy day yesterday, teaching until 7 o'clock, and then after that, I basically had to get some dinner and kind of get to bed. But I've got all your messages in my inbox, and you'll definitely hear my reply before the end of the day. So just hang in there for that. And other than that, we do have today's review session. So if you guys have that study guide, which I know you've been sent the study guide and that you have a copy of it somewhere. So go ahead and let me know in this chat which questions on the guide that you'd like to talk about just now. I have a copy here in one of my windows, so I'll be able to refer to the number that you mentioned. And then me, your fellow classmates, and you, we will all work together to try and come up with the information. Okay, so Cameron, you're asking about question 13. Question 13, so you're talking about the one that says explain Nagel's critique of the argument from design, that's right? Okay, we're gonna take them one by one. So let's start off on 13 and then we can get to the others that you guys are mentioning. So let's see. When it comes to the argument from design, what do you think? What is the criticism that Nagel gives? There's kind of a couple of significant criticisms that he does make. But let's see if anyone can throw something into the chat that will help us get started on that topic. So, Mr. Nagel, Ernest Nagel, American philosopher of the 20th century. What did he say on this? So, give me some information there in the chat, and we can move from there. Ernest Nagel. He wrote the article, Does God Exist? It contains a compilation of criticisms of the various arguments. So Eva, the order and complexity seen in the world can be explained without God. It can be explained according to evolution. Yes. Also Jason, he says, you don't have to understand something to know it has been made by someone. No, not that one so much, Jason, because that's a defense of the argument from design. That's what Paley himself says. This question number 13 is about the criticism of Paley, not what Paley, the author, argued for. It's what opponents of Paley say against him, all right? So Paley was the guy who said that you still know a watch has a maker, even if you don't know anything about how it was made. Now, the criticism that comes back, sort of clap back from Nagel, is that you just cannot compare the case of the watch with the eye. Shaylee, you say this, the only reason we believe something that has a function needs a creator is because we have never seen a watch that did not have a creator. Exactly. And we know who those creators are, especially because we are those people. So what this tells us then is that the comparison between the watch and the eye is perhaps not the best. And then the second aspect of this criticism, which you pointed out there, Eva, is that there's a different way of explaining the presence of order and function in nature that makes no assumption of the existence of God, and that would be the theory of Darwinian biology and evolution. So it's kind of like a two-part criticism. Number one, the analogy of the eye and the watch is weak because although they do both have a function, we know that the watch has a creator only because we have never seen a watch that was not designed by somebody. But when we consider the case of the items that we see within nature, they can be explained as having a function, but according to a naturalistic hypothesis, namely the hypothesis of evolution. So there you go. That's the major stuff that was talked about then in the Nagel reply. So let's get into that next point. And I have an idea here. So let me just try this out with you guys. So next one you say is question 13, right? Is that true? Okay, I'm looking there. Question 13, and that, 21. And the question 21 is, explain the test that Everett suggests for gaining evidence that a certain type of being does not exist. Okay, so go back in your memory to Nicholas Everett. Nicholas Everett wrote the paper, Theism in Modern Science. And in that paper, he makes this argument that, there's a conflict, there's a clash between religion and science, but he says that we can understand why science seems to contradict religion by looking at this kind of formal argument that he gives on, I believe, page 66 of the book. Now here, let me think about this. I think this can expedite and maybe make a little more efficient our meeting just now. So what I'm gonna do is this, okay guys? I'm putting into our chat a Zoom link, and then we will do the dual platform thing so that I can use your microphones if you would like to help contribute a little bit more in real time. And then I can also pull up the screen share so that we can all have a common frame of reference. but this YouTube video is also going to continue to record so that people can watch it later. So look at this in the chat. Can you see that link? If you can, please click the link and then just join that meeting so that we can have a shared screen and use the mic so we can get a little bit quicker with the response time. All right, so we'll be right there. But I'm still allowing the YouTube to roll for the purposes of posterity. Okay, so we're all here. Thanks, guys. I'm going to share my screen. So now the sharing of the screen is up. Here's our study guide. Okay, and I'm going to bring the chat window up. So can everybody hear me and see the screen share? Let me know in the chat here so that I can confirm that, the Zoom chat. Shaylee, you have to do the one, you have two windows open, so you have to mute the other window, not me. Okay, so everyone can hear me then, that's good. Great, so we've talked about number 13 just now, and now we're looking at 21. Explain the test that Everett suggests for gaining evidence that a certain type of being does not exist. So anybody let me know about that. If you wish, use the microphone or the chat. So 21. How does this guy say that you could gain evidence that a being does not exist? I'm essentially asking about his formal argument on the first page of his paper. There's two premises that lead to a conclusion. Let's say what those are. You have to know, so you've got to tell me. What does it say? By the way, just so you know, everything that's in these questions are just questions that come from the book and the material in the book. So none of the stuff is like made up by me or just the professor's weird ideas. I have no ideas. I'm like a circuit that the information flows through from the book, from the author to the book to you. I don't take anything away or add anything. Say if there's a being with nature and intention that will produce a certain change, okay, good. Now, he uses these variables. Let's not forget, if there is a being with nature N and intention I, then it will produce change C in the world. But that's only the first premise, Jason, which is a good start. But what is the rest of the argument? What's the rest of the argument? Let me know. Maybe somebody speak up on the mic. Okay, well then I see you, Jason. Here we go. If the change is not present, then that being does not exist. It's not exactly how it's stated, though. You're kind of like oversimplifying it a little. The second premise says that the world does not display change C. Like you look for the change that you would have expected to see, but you don't see it. And then the conclusion is that that provides evidence that the being does not exist. Okay, so in terms of God, you know, the question is, does this universe seem to be the type of universe you would think it would be if it had been created by God for the purposes of man? And he thinks no, because if God really is the creator and we are the special acts of creation, like created in his image, then everything should revolve around humanity. We should be in the middle of everything. The universe shouldn't be so much bigger than us. We should have appeared way early in the beginning of the universe. But science seems to not, science seems to contradict all those claims. Quite the contrary, according to scientific analysis of reality. So that means that the world doesn't seem to display the features that you would have thought in case it had been made by a creator God just for mankind. Okay, so the formal argument that he gives is the method, the test that he asks one to take to see whether a being does or does not exist. Consider whether you can find the behaviors or changes that you would have expected such a being to produce in case it did exist. And the failure to see any such signs would be evidence of non-existence. Okay. So then what's next? Megan, you're talking about number 30, I guess? O'Neill's account of what it is to treat someone as a mere means. Okay, mentioned very briefly, kind of as an afterthought to the main presentation of the work of Kant. But Honora O'Neill just tried to give what she called a simplified account of Kant's ethics. And what she thinks is that as technical and complicated as Kant's work can sometimes seem, there's a way of boiling it down to something pretty basic and easy, and that is to think of the second version of the categorical imperative, which says that you're never supposed to treat a human being as a means. Honora O'Neill says there's a precise way to determine whether you are going to treat someone as a means or not. So tell me about that. Who knows what did Honora O'Neill say? You treat someone as a means when you do what to or with a person. That's something that can be, I guess, stated pretty quickly. So let me know. You have three main resources. You have the book, which is the main thing, because that's where everything's found. Then you have the lectures. And then you also have your memory. And you have the combination of all those things. So, yeah, when you involve someone in an interaction that they would not consent to, you treat them as a means to an end. So, like if you stole from somebody to gain their money, they didn't give you permission for that. If you rape somebody to have like the pleasure of the act against the person's will, then of course, by definition, they didn't consent to that. If you kill somebody to take an inheritance or something that you wouldn't have gotten if they had died later, then that's using their life as a means to your end. So, you know, any situation where you're doing something with another person that that person would not agree with under full information is a case of using that person as a means to an end. So to assure that you don't use anyone as a means to an end, just make sure that you don't do anything with or to another person that that person would not consent to under conditions of full information. So you need free and informed consent from others when you involve them in interactions, and if that's not obtained, then the interaction involving them is manipulative and is using them as a means. So you treat someone as a means when you involve them in an interaction that they would not consent to. And go back to O'Neill and find the information on that if you like. And this is something that I encourage everybody to do. I'm trying to emphasize this, that you should use the textbook as a resource for the information in the class. I know a lot of people try to bypass books because they think it's easier to just hear words spoken or watch videos. But there's no substitute really for engagement with the book itself. And that's going to be the clearest source for any of the answers. But anyway, we're having as much help as possible. So next is 36. 36, explain Singer's response to two of the differences between killing and failing to assist. So let us ask, first of all, what those so-called differences are in the first place. And that has to do with question 35. So this helps for both of those questions. What are the stated differences between killing and failing to assist that were mentioned by Peter Singer? So there were I think there were 5. Let's just list them if we can, and then we'll have enough on the table to discuss his replies to them. So
is it okay if I just answer over the mic?
Yes, definitely. I'd like that. So let me know.
So
and
the possible
Megan,
differences
right?
were difference in motives.
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't want to.
And then that it was not hard to avoid killing someone, but it was difficult to save all the lives that you could.
Okay.
Difference in the certainty of your outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Identifiability of the victim.
Yes.
And then that you could always say that it's not your fault.
Yes, not my fault that they're poor. I was sorry to interrupt you. I was just making sure it's Megan, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, sorry. So if I was speaking while you were talking, I didn't mean to. But yeah, what you said was correct. So those are 5 differences between killing and failing to assist. Different motive, difference of certainty of the outcome, identifiability of the victim. It's not hard to avoid killing, but it's hard to save all the lives that you could via assistance. And then you can always say it's not my fault they're poor, unlike anything you can say in the case of killing. Now, what are the responses that Singer gives to these differences between killing and failing to assist? So he gives a variety of responses to try and indicate that in some of these points, we can agree that killing is worse by comparison than failure to assist, but nonetheless, it does not exclude all blame or eliminate all the blameworthiness and wrongness from the failure to assist. So the takeaway is that it's still wrong not to assist, even if, let's say, killing perhaps is worse than even that. Okay, so now about certainty and motivation. The kind of case that he gives there has to do with a person who, on the one hand, takes an action that is reckless, but not intending any harm, versus another action which intends harm directly. So like, for example, the difference between a drunk driver and a homicidal driver that's intentionally going to try and hit people. Now, of the 2 cases, one of them is more certain to cause a deadly outcome. So difference in certainty. The homicidal driver more certainly will hurt people than the drunk driver would. But although that is true, the drunk driver still is doing something bad. Why? Because even if they're not as likely to kill people than a person trying to make that happen, they still might very well do it, and it adds to the likelihood of it, and it makes it a little more risky. So by adding additional exposure of risk to some unknown people, the drunk driver still does something wrong. Now, if you fail to assist the poor, this is not as certain to kill or hurt people as if you had gone to the third world starting to shoot at people trying to kill them, like directly. But even if it's not as certain that the failure to donate will give harm, it makes it more likely that the harm will materialize one way or the other, so it's still to that extent wrong. So that's about certainty. How about motivation? Well, the drunk driver doesn't have a killer's motive. They just have a self-interested motive. But they are acting in a way that's a little bit reckless and heedless of people's well-being, placing them in harm's way and adding danger. Now, the homicidal driver has an evil motive. They are intending to hit people and kill them. So is there a worse motive on the part of the killer driver? Yes. But that does not erase all blame from the drunk driver, because although they're not motivated by a murderous intent, they're still doing something that knowingly adds risk and danger. So when you fail to assist the poor, maybe you're not motivated by hatred of the poor and the desire that they be starving. But even so, if you know that the money could have been something that would make it less likely that poor people somewhere would starve, then you're still subject to some criticism. How about the point that it's not my fault that they're poor? He says two things to that. First of all, I don't want to oversimplify, but he's sort of like, yeah, it is. Or, not like directly, but indirectly, many of us, of course, are the continuing benefactors of what some describe as like an unjust system of economic and colonial exploitation in the past. So if we, if our ancestors, some of us anyway, created those conditions and we are these sort of existing beneficiaries of it, some people would argue that we therefore have a moral duty to somewhat rectify the historical injustices and balance the scales of justice, because that kind of historical inequality could have led to the haves and have-nots that we see globally today. The second thing he says, though, is that even if you deny responsibility, even indirectly, for the unequal socioeconomic conditions of the planet, you're still, he thinks, a person who should be inspired by utilitarian moral principles to do whatever you can to improve on overall human happiness, whether it's your fault or not that people are unhappy. So basically he says to that, we bear some indirect responsibility, or if we don't, so what? We still should be good utilitarians and try and make things better. And then when it comes to identifiability of the victim, he gave the case of the person who sells a chemical consumable product that if you ingest it, it doubles the risk of stomach cancer. So if a person did take that product and years down the line gets stomach cancer, they may complain to the vendor that it's their fault that they're dying of it. But the vendor could then try to defend himself against moral blame by saying, who knows if you're really my victim? You do have stomach cancer, and I'm sorry about that. But who knows if it was really from my product or if it was just from something else? After all, my product doesn't guarantee that you get stomach cancer. It just doubles the likelihood. So that doesn't excuse all this blame, though, from this hypothetical vendor. Because even if we can't pinpoint precisely who it is who has had harm visited upon them because of the product they took, it's still the case that everyone who did take it had more risk. And he knew that when he sold it. So when you fail to assist, it might not be so certain that anyone's going to really be hurt out there, because maybe the money that you could have given would have been wasted away anyway. But despite that fact, it's not as certain to cause this deadly outcome, but it adds to a risk. So it's not as certain as in the case where someone goes out intentionally trying to kill, but nonetheless, I was talking about identifiability victim. Let me strike that for just a second. Cross wires because I was talking about the other example. Identifiability of the victim. So we might not be able to point out anybody in the world who is specifically starved because you failed to assist. But even not having that knowledge, adding to the joint pool of risk that unknown people will face, still qualifies the act as to some extent wrong. So there's a lot of information there, but you don't need all of it, because the question number 36, it only asks about two of the differences and how he replies to two of them. So you can just sort of take your pick. I kind of think that certainty and motivation are easy because they both rely on the same example, which is the drunk versus homicidal driver example. But anyway, good. So let's keep going. I know you've probably got more questions than those, so let's see here in this chat, in whatever way you want. You can go over more. Number 15, Kylie, okay. Okay, the problem of evil. What's the problem of evil? That could be stated pretty straightforwardly, but also you'd have to give a little discussion, I think, of the premises. But okay, problem of evil, it's an argument. It has two premises that lead to the conclusion. Somebody needs to tell me what this argument is about, what it's trying to prove, what the premises are, all that. So what is it? Definitely, you got to tell me. Okay, if God existed, there would not be evil. That's the first premise. But there is evil. Second premise. Not done yet, though. Close. So therefore, God does not exist. Right. Everybody can see that in the chat. That's the argument. It's a simple argument. If God did exist, then in that case, there would not be evil in the world. First premise. Below that, next premise goes from there. But there is evil in the world. There is evil in the world. So the conclusion, therefore, is that God does not exist. Now that's the argument. That's just the bare bones statement of it. But to fully explain that you really know what it means and you haven't just memorized words, then you have to tell me why these premises are being written. So why does somebody say that if God existed, there would not be evil in the world? What's the connection between the idea of God and the thought that there shouldn't be any evil? Tell me that one. Why would it be true? Why would anybody claim that? Megan, yeah?
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Is it that he's omniscient and omnibenevolent, and so if such a being that was both omniscient and omnibenevolent like actually existed, then they wouldn't want evil in the world and they would get rid of it?
Okay, good. Almost perfect. You said omniscient and omnibenevolent. But omniscient, what does that mean?
All-knowing.
It's all-knowing, right. But it's more about him being all something else. What is that? Knowing stuff doesn't mean you can do anything. I can know everything but not be able to affect anything. So what's the other thing that he's supposed to have? Megan, no?
All-powerful, but I don't know the word.
Okay, good. But let's not forget that word. That word is omnipotent. But if we say omniscient, it means something else. So they're both qualities associated with God, but yeah, omnipotence and omnibenevolence. Good. So if he's all-powerful, then in that case, he could do anything. Anything at all. Nothing that he couldn't do. And if he's all good, perfectly, infinitely good, then he's like the ultimate adversary of evil and badness. So a perfectly powerful and good being would have the ability and the desire to prevent evil and not allow it to happen. So you'd think, according to the argument, that if God really does exist, as they think he does, then evil wouldn't exist. But looking at the world, there is evil. So the conclusion is just stated that there must not be a God. Why? Because if there was, it wouldn't be evil, but actually there is. So God must not exist after all. What kind of evil? I don't know. There's a lot of not so great things that you could think of. Not very pleasant things, but I mean, people dying, Holocaust, I don't know, people getting tortured, just horrible things. Those are not good. There's evil, sometimes just seems senseless, of course. And therefore, that's the reason that some people think there's no God. So that's the problem of evil argument. It's an argument that's given by skeptics and atheists to try and make an attempt to disprove that God exists. Now, as with the other arguments we've studied on the side of God's existence, there are criticisms of that. People could say, well, it's not really evil. It's all for the best if you look at the big picture, or God wants to give us free will, or et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, okay, so there you have that one. That's the problem of evil and some discussion. What else? What's next? Where do you want to go next? I mean, I don't know if you want to scroll around the list or something if you're using just this digital screen as a reference. So I'm just going to kind of dance back and forth, up and down, waiting for you to tell me which one you want to go over now. 22? No problem, okay. So, and then, yeah, no problem. We'll go over 22 and then 9. So starting on 22 for the moment, what it says here is, how is the actual world not appropriate as an expression of God's intentions, according to Everett? I think we kind of briefly touched on this just a little earlier today in this meeting when we went over his test for establishing that a being does not exist. But now, let's get into these details one more time. So yeah, what are the reasons given by Everett that the actual world or universe, as it seems to be in scientific analysis, is not the kind of universe that God would have created that expresses the intentions of God. What is it about the world, the universe, that makes it seem as though it's not the appropriate expression of God's intentions? Man would have appeared earlier in the universe. That's one point. Yes, Jason. So, but we didn't, according to science anyway. So that's one thing that doesn't seem to line up with the religious hypothesis. We would have appeared closer in time to the other non-human animals, yes. Why should they have been populating the earth for millions, billions of years, waiting for humans to emerge, if humans are the whole primary reason that the universe exists? And then, Drew, the universe would be smaller. Good. Why should it be that if the universe was created for the sake of man, that like almost all of it just doesn't have humans in it, and there's just so much space out there that has nothing to do with human beings on the planet Earth? So it would be earlier in the overall universe, not too much later than the other animals. The universe would not be so much bigger than us. Okay, good, Jason. We'd also be in the center of it all, you would think, because if God created us for the sake of being his crown jewel of creation, created in his image, we should have a kind of pride of place. Everything should revolve around us. That was an important assumption in earlier generations of the Christian church. So anyway, we should be in the middle. We should appear right at the beginning, not long after the other animals. The universe shouldn't be so much smaller than us, bigger than us, rather. Was there another one? Early in the universe, close to the animals. The universe would be smaller. We should be in the middle of it. I think that's it, right? Am I forgetting one? No, I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, these are all the factors. But according to science anyway, none of these things are the case. We did not appear in like the first 7 days of the universe. Billions and billions of years passed before life emerged. We did not appear early even in the history of the Earth's timeline, because evolution took a long time to even produce mammalian life, much less intelligent bipedal mammalian life like what we are. We're not even in the center of our own solar system, and we all know how big the universe is. So according to science, the universe doesn't look the sort of way you would think if it had really been created by God just for the sake of man. That's just the argument given by Everett. We've studied a lot of arguments on either side of this question, but number whatever it is, 22 that you're asking about, is asking about those points of contrast between the universe as it is found according to science versus the type of universe that you would generally expect if the religious claim that God made it for us was true. Okay, and so then you're saying now, Megan, number 9. Yeah, so let me know about that. What is the principle of sufficient reason? That's a question that we should know. It's a principle. It says that, it says something. What does it say? For every something, there has to be a something. What are these things I'm talking about? Just to give you a hint. Okay, so Christopher, in the case of any positive truth, there has to be some sufficient reason for it. Yes. So we can say that in multiple ways. One way to say it is that for any fact, there has to be a cause. There has to be a cause for any fact. So how would that relate to a proof of God's existence? This claim or this principle that anything that is true has to have a cause or reason. So how does that even get close to saying that therefore there has to be God? Just take that next step. I mean, the principle leads to that. So the universe exists, right, Jason? And according to the principle of sufficient reason, the universe, just as much as any other thing, has to have a cause. Once we start thinking about this really deep question, what could be the cause of the universe? Taylor and others believe that there's really only one way that argument could go from there, and that's leading us towards the conclusion that there must be a God. Because after all, if the universe exists and it has to have a cause, it can't be self-caused. It also can't be caused by some other thing that has to have a cause, because that just doesn't really lead us to the ultimate beginning. So if there is an ultimate beginning, and it seems like there has to be, because an infinity of causes just doesn't make sense, if there's some beginning point in the sequence of events, then the first thing must be a necessary being that causes the universe and everything else. So the principle of sufficient reason is supposed to lead us on to the question, well, if everything has a cause, what about the universe and what caused it? And then it's just a couple steps away at that point to the conclusion that the only viable explanation is that the universe was caused by God or some being that is not contingent. Okay. To be fair, there is a lot of overlap between question 8 and 9. I guess 9 is just a little more narrowly tailored to the principle of sufficient reason, but any question involving number 8 would also, I think, have to at least touch on that too. Okay, so we can go from here to whatever else as you're looking at the list. You can let me know. I'm seeing the chat. I'm hearing the mics. I'm ready for whatever questions you could throw out at me. And so is the rest of the class. So, I mean, this is your time. You want help, now's the time to get it. So let me know. Number 43, okay, there at the end, the looping track, and 42. All right, so let's explore these questions. Maybe we could just go over the trolley questions in general, since you're asking about 2 of them. Well, Drew, you're also asking about number 24. Let's come back to that in a moment, because the other 2 are on the same topic, so that'll be something we can do all at once. So let us take a quick look at number 40, because all of the questions after that have some relevance to the general problem of the trolley problem. So what's the trolley problem, first of all? And to explain it, you kind of have to make a reference to those cases. Now, I know, unless you're going to use the mic, it'll probably be too much for you to type quickly. But what is the problem? How would you tell me? You don't have to give the most detailed response if you want to just write something out, but just gesture at it. Like, what is the overall problem of this essay? It's actually like, okay, so Jason, a trolley's on a path to kill 5. Fair enough. But what? There's an alternate path where it would kill 1, sure. True. But what? So that's all you got for me. Okay, so then the cause of the switch varies between scenarios. Yes, well, in the various trolley situations, there's an individual who is positioned at a switch, and by touching the switch, they divert the trolley path from 5 to 1. And essentially, everybody hearing the case says, go ahead and do it. That would not be wrong at all. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not wrong. It's okay. It's morally permitted for this switching to happen so that the trolley just goes in another direction. But Jason, here's something important, all right? And I've noticed this because I've asked this question before on exams and stuff. And a lot of times students, they just hear the trolley problem and they just think, trolley going towards people, is it going to hit 5 or 1? What do you do? And they just leave it at that. But that is totally not the right answer, and that would get not that many points. Trolley problem is the juxtaposition between 2 cases, okay? It's transplant and trolley driver or bystander at the switch. The problem is not just internal to the trolley scenario. It only appears when you contrast the way an audience reacts to a question about whether it would be right or wrong to flip the switch in bystander versus transplant, where everybody says that the surgical maneuver to kill 1 and save 5, that is wrong. So the problem is just to ask why it is that people have a reaction which says this action is wrong, but not this one. Bystander versus transplant. Why is it that nobody thinks it's wrong for the bystander to flip the switch, but everybody thinks it's wrong for the transplant surgeon to operate? So you hearing me? That's the trolley problem. So if this question comes up, you can't just be like, there's a guy at a switch. Should he push it? There you go. That's the problem. That is not the problem. The problem is to ask why it is that when an audience is polled, they overwhelmingly say that's not wrong, but then they overwhelmingly do say that the transplant surgeon's action is wrong. That's the problem. The problem is to try and explain why people have 2 different reactions to 2 similar cases. Okay? So you have to talk about the 2 cases. 2 cases. You have to say, okay, first there's bystander at the switch. And bystander at the switch, you got a runaway trolley, passed out driver, fork in the track, 5-on-1 stretch. That's its current trajectory. If the bystander flips it, it goes up, it hits 1. If he does flip the switch, the audience says that's not wrong. For the most part, they say that's not wrong. But here, another case. Now you mentioned transplant. In the other case, transplant, we got 5 people dying of organ failure. Surgeon can murder 1 person to take the organ, save the 5. Would that be okay? Audience is asked. Audience comes back. They say, no, that's not okay. That is wrong. Now here's the trolley problem. Question. The trolley problem is a question. It's the question, why do audiences feel overwhelmingly that the action of the bystander is not wrong and the action of the surgeon is. Okay, that's just the problem. It's just that question that arises after the results of polling audiences in two cases are compared against each other, the results of the two sets of polling. Okay, now question 41 is man on the bridge. The best way for me to go next, though, is to jump to 42. So, Eva, this will go right to your question. So we've heard the problem now. That it helps us on 40. But what is the solution, okay? 42 now. What is the solution, according to Thompson? So the solution, again, like why then does it happen that people seem to think that the action of the bystander is okay, but not the action of the surgeon? Why is that? What's the solution? According to Thompson, the solution is a certain principle which governs our intuitions on cases like this. But what's the principle that she asserts? You can redirect threat to a smaller group when the same threat is present. Well, be careful, Jason, about the end, because you didn't add enough detail at the last part. So you may redirect a threat from a larger to a smaller group of people as long as it is the same threat. Okay, good there. But the last part, and as long as the means of diverting the threat is what you don't include there. As long as the means of diverting the threat do not violate anyone's important rights. And you also did not include the word important, which is necessary. So that's the second clause. It also has to be that the means of diverting the threat do not violate any person's important rights. So how does that solve the problem? How does that solve the problem? Don't just give the solution, then use it. Tell me how it solves the problem. Why does this explain how people have the two different reactions? Okay, so I'll help you get started. Because in the trolley case, and then follow from there. Tell me how the solution solves the problem. Because it's still not exactly a 100% satisfying answer unless you apply the stated solution to the two cases after you're done. So how does it solve the problem? Because in the trolley case, the threat, and go on from there, tell me. Either in the chat or on the microphone, whatever you want. How does that principle solve the problem? That it's okay to switch a threat from a bigger to a smaller group as long as it's the same threat and the means of shifting it doesn't violate anyone's important rights. Okay, in the trolley case, the same threat is diverted from the bigger to the smaller group. Exactly, Drew, because it's the same trolley. It's the same trolley, which is either going to go towards 5 or 1. But it's not like there's two distinct threatening dangers. There's just one, and it's being funneled into a less populated area. But why is that not seen in the transplant case? That's the last piece then, Drew, or anybody else. So good so far, but last piece. Why, though, don't people think it's okay to do the thing that the surgeon does? Why is that one judged to be wrong, unlike the trolley? You're almost there. The same threat is not being diverted, okay? But be precise. What is the one threat on the 5, and what is the different threat on the 1? The rights being violated, Drew, let's hold that for a minute, because that has to do with the man on the bridge thing. But the threat now to the 1, be precise, to who? To the 1, the threat is the surgeon. To the 5, the threat is organ failure. So it's not transfer of one threat to a smaller group. It's not diversion of threat from one group to another. It's the establishment of an entirely different threat on the smaller number than what is being faced by the 5. So there you go. Now, man on the bridge, question 41. That example is given to show the reason why that second clause has to be added as well. Because the man on the bridge case is supposed to problematize the original unamended solution, which just says it's okay to divert a threat from a bigger to a smaller group as long as it's the same threat. Okay, so in man on the bridge, there's the trolley passing under a bridge, going towards 5 people, and that would kill the 5. It would kill the 5 people. Up on top of the bridge, though, you have one, I don't know, just regular sized person, and then another extremely large person. And what could be done to prevent the death of the 5 people from the trolley is if the one regular sized person pushes the big guy over so that he tumbles into the oncoming path of the trolley and it impacts him, and he serves as a barricade and prevents it from hitting the other 5. Now, in that case, they ask the audience, is this permissible or not? And the audience responds, no, that's not okay. That's wrong. That's not morally permitted. Well, what about Thompson's solution, though? Because it says that it's okay to shift a threat from bigger to smaller group as long as it's the same threat. And here it does look like it's the same threat, because the same trolley that would have hit 5 instead, through the act of pushing the guy off the bridge, it will hit the same trolley would just hit 1. So then why do people feel that it's wrong? Well, it's because although it matches the first clause, it violates that second clause that gets added in. Because here, the means of diverting the threat involve pushing somebody, a push. The act of pushing is an important right violation. But in the other versions of trolley cases, it's a switch which is touched. And the touching of a switch does not by itself count as an important rights violation. So it's permissible to divert threats away from bigger towards smaller numbers of people, but 2 things. It must be the same threat, and number 2, as Man on the Bridge case illustrates, the way of shifting the threat must not violate any important rights. My substitute example given to you guys to help you think about this point in another way was the grenade thrown into the bunker example. If that did happen, it would not really be wrong for one of the soldiers to act in a way of ultimate sacrifice and voluntarily jump on top of it so that they would blunt the destruction of the impact of the explosive, killing them and saving the other 5. But it would not be okay to, because now, although the same grenade diverted threat from 5 to 1, the means of getting it to be shifted towards the 1 violate an important right of the 1. So Man on the Bridge case illustrates that it's not just shifting from a bigger to a smaller group, the same threat. Yes, that's a part of it. But it's also important, part 2, is that the way that you divert the threat can't violate an important right. So flip a switch if you must, but not push a person, basically. Okay, now the loop track is question 43. And in the loop track, the example is supposed to show that Kant's solution to the problem doesn't work. Now, what was the moral principle of Kant that some people thought could solve this problem? Some people said, well, maybe the reason that everyone thinks the transplant surgeon is doing something wrong, but not the bystander, is because of this Kant idea that you should never use a person as a means, right, Jason? And some feel that in the case of the surgeon, the victim is used as a means, but not in the case of the bystander at the switch. The reason that that is sometimes argued is because although in the 2 situations there's a person who dies and 5 who live, the person who dies in surgeon case is used as a means because their body parts are the source of life-saving potential for the other 5 people. And if they were somehow unavailable as the surgeon were about to take their organs, then he couldn't use the organs to save the 5 lives. But in the bystander case, although the trolley is being sent in his direction, it's not his death that really prevents the death of the 5 people. It's the movement of the trolley away from where they are at. So it's sort of like if he wasn't on that trolley track, we still would have saved 5 lives by sending the trolley up in that direction. So his death is not really so much essential ingredient to saving the 5 lives, just sending a trolley somewhere else is. That makes it seem like he's not used as a means, he's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But in the case of the transplant surgeon, he's definitely used as a means because his body parts are the source of saving the lives, and you can't save them without him dying. But when we make the case loop, okay, and when we switch up the trolley case so that there's a big loop and there's a big guy on one side of it, now it seems like he actually has to die in order to prevent the trolley from striking the other 5, because if he wasn't present on the track, then his body wouldn't prevent it from continuing on its course. So what that means is that everyone should feel like it's wrong to flip the switch in the loop situation. But for whatever reason, that's not how people respond. When given the scenario of loop, and if you guys want, watch the video that I linked to yesterday, because it has footage of people taking the survey and taking the poll in a big auditorium. And yeah, like people don't feel that that's wrong. So if that's not wrong, then Kant's solution cannot assist, because in both transplant and in loop, the victim is used as a means. And nonetheless, people only think that the transplant action is wrong, but that the loop action is okay. So Kant's solution doesn't work. That's why Thompson believes that her solution in the end is the right one. Okay. So just discussion of the trolley scenario topics at the end of the list. We have a few more minutes, so just let me know if you have a little bit more. Let me say this, I'm thinking of holding like one bonus office hour tomorrow, because my typical office hours on Friday occur after the test, and then that wouldn't really help anybody. I'm not saying anybody wants to come or has to, of course, but if anybody wanted to try and get a little bit of additional time to talk any of the topics over, I'm thinking of tomorrow from 2 to 3. So I'll send a Zoom link through Canvas, and if anybody wanted to, they could drop by during those special bonus office hours and just see me then. But yeah, 2 to 3 tomorrow. I'll send a notification so you can get one more try to ask a question if you have any more. Number 3, what are 3 positions on the questions of God existence? Does anybody know that? What are they? There's 3 major ones. We talked about this on like our first day of lecture. So there's blank, blank, and blank. Some people hold the view about God's existence. Okay, good, Drew. Theist, atheist, agnostic. You define them, give examples. So theist, it's a person who believes that God does exist. That could be Christian, Jew, Muslim. It could be any religious particular practice, as long as the individual believes that there's God. Okay? Atheist is the opposite. That's an individual that does not believe that God exists. So they lack the belief in God. They don't have that belief. And then agnostics are like individuals who take neither view. They say, well, I'm not going to affirm nor deny because they just think there's not enough evidence for proof or for disproof. So they remain open-minded, or they just suspend judgment on the question because they think there's not clear enough evidence. And everybody in the world is one of these 3 things. So I don't know, which one are you? You're either a theist, a believer, atheist, a non-believer, or just an open-minded, kind of undecided person like an agnostic. Okay? Now, the vast majority of people globally are theists of some type, but atheism is a significant minority position that some people hold, and there's, I think, evidence that it's growing as a percentage of the overall population, especially in the Western world, but obviously theism is still the mainstream majority position. Okay, what else? Anything else? Not much time, but maybe one more quick one could be thrown out if you want. And it's just up to you. No? Okay, 24. Happiness is the, okay, yeah, so thanks, Drew, about that one. Happiness is the only thing that we pursue as an end and not as a means. So what is an end and what is a means? Let's start with that. What is an end? Just throw it out there quick, not too much time. End, anybody? It's a goal, right, it's a goal. It's a goal, it's an objective. So ends equals goals. What is a means? The way you get there, the things that you do to reach the goal, okay? So if I have, like if I was a person with the goal of becoming rich, maybe a means to it would be investing money in the stock market or something, or, taking on a business that I think is going to really soar to the top of, the trading markets. So anyway, means and ends. Now, what this question asks is, why does Mill say that happiness, pleasure, is the only thing we pursue as an end, not as a means? Well, in other words, why is it that pleasure and happiness is our ultimate goal and nothing else is our goal? That's the only goal. Everything that you're doing in your whole life is for the sake of becoming happy. It's for the sake of pursuing your personal happiness. So you're in school right now. You're doing it because you believe there will be some happiness in the end if you can get a degree and get the things that come with that in your life. People get married because they believe that'll make happiness. They have kids because that'll make them happy. Even when you're doing things that not in the short term are pleasant, like you're working hard and you feel like this is too much work, but you're doing it for the sake of a goal at the end that's going to reward you. So everything you do is for the sake of happiness. Even everything else that you want in life is just used as a means to get there. So that's all he's saying. And the reason that he mentions that is because he says the maximization of happiness and pleasure should be the standard of ethics. And if each one of us is pursuing happiness individually in our own lives, then we recognize it as a good thing by our own behavior. So maximizing it, trying to create more of it rather than less, is the way that he thinks we should organize our ethical decisions. Okay. Well, let's just cut for now because I guess it is 9:50. So just be ready to receive the test form from me on Friday. I'll send you guys a little note about the precise instructions, but they're really simple. It's just you're going to receive the test form in a Canvas message at 9 a.m. on Friday, and then you'll have until the end of the class period to simply reply back your answers. And you'll have to answer 6 of the questions that I list. and a shortened, curated selection of questions off of this master list. So I'll take like 9 or 10, and then you have to answer 6 of those for the sake of the test. And I'll also hold those bonus office hours tomorrow for anybody looking to have one last time to talk it over. And to anybody that's emailed me as of yesterday or this morning, you'll get your response by the end of the day for sure, or early morning tomorrow, maybe if it came in this morning. All right, guys, so thanks again. Have a good one. I'm going to end the Zoom meeting for now. So thank you, and then I'm going to end the YouTube live just after that. So thanks again. Okay, guys, I'm ending this one too. So thanks, and I'll see you soon.